welcome to volume 43 of AskABrit, the format, of course, in which I ask you fine people to ask me any question you like, so long as you use this hashtag. And so long as it's in line with the theme that was laid out at the end of last week's video. So stay tuned for the end of this video to find out what next week's theme is going to be. But this week's theme is alcohol. And what a week it's been, especially for alcohol, in fact, because St. Patrick's Day happened just this past Sunday. And in Chicago, Tara and I got to see the river dye green. And to honour St. Patrick's Day, and specifically the Irish, I have here a can, or is it a tin, of Guinness, which I'm going to drink on air here. Usually I don't drink on air. I do it in between takes. I'm going to do it here, and I'm also going to just listen to that. The sound. Oh, crap. Foamed a bit. It foamed a bit at the mouth. You know, we've all had that problem. Even cans of Guinness have that problem. But this is going to hopefully help me through the show. Either that or put me to sleep and make this show unwatchable. We got a lot of questions that sort of sit in various buckets of alcohol, not literal buckets of alcohol. That would be messy and I wouldn't want to clean it up. But if your question did not make the list, just sit back and commiserate with a beer. I mean, that's what I'm doing. Well, I'm not commiserating. I'm merely partaking in, I'm quaffing. All right, a couple of you, and that's Lisa and JWB52Z, ask questions around the theme of do British people drink a lot, essentially. So Lisa asks, is it true that the British drink much more alcohol than Americans? And what type of alcohol is usually a young person first introduced to in Britain? And JWB52Z asks, do you think British people really can drink more before getting drunk than other people? So I think that we're not leading the way. I think Germany and Ireland are ahead of us in the league table. It's like fantasy football, only with beer and countries. But the English do drink in far greater quantities, I would say, than your average American. And as to whether they can take their alcohol a bit better, well, I'll let you be the judge of this by the end of the show. If you're out on a weekend in Grimsby, which is where I highly recommend you take a vacation just to see what it's like, culture shock more than anything, you'll see that British people, on the whole, can't take their drinks. They can take a bottle to the head, you know, and they usually do, from some other drunkard who took exception to the fact that this one touched his bird and all that. There are different levels of being able to take it. I mean, I'm sure if I went up to Mr. Bottlehead and said, you can't take your alcohol, I would be dead. I think back in the old days, and I'll get to this later on, I couldn't take my alcohol. It's got to the point now where I can have little more than one can and I'm roasted. Is that a term? Should be, if it's not. Angela, my friend from back home, from Grimsby, no less, who can possibly attest to the violent nature of some of those bottleheads. Angela asks, the best thing about Thursday nights is the pub quiz at the Wheat Sheaf. That's in Grimsby. Do you have pub quizzes, and are they as popular in the US as they are in the UK? Also, any suggestions on a team name? I'm rather partial to Tequila Mockingbird, was one of my favourites back in the day. But in terms of the popularity of pub quizzes, I think they're more of a novelty. In many ways, they exist. They do exist. I went to one at the Red Lion, I think is the name of it, in Indianapolis, and I was trounced both alcoholically and by the other teams. Katie Diffior, is that how I pronounce your name, Katie? The beer says it is, and I can't argue with that right now. Katie asks, what is the legal drinking age in the UK? It's 18. And how old were you when you first had a drink? I was 4, Katie. No, I'm kidding. I was 8. My Aunt Rose used to feed me sherry. Do you feed people drinks? I don't think so, but I've had one, so I can't do words. It's a good job I'm not doing any of the stuff, hard liquor. Speaking of which, we received a number of questions about whiskey. So Kevin Thorpe asks, are you a bourbon or a Scotch whiskey person? Pips K, I love Scotch whiskey. Do you? And if so, what is your favourite brand of Scotch whiskey? Andrea's Life asks, do you drink any American whiskies? If so, which do you like? And Suzette GB says or asks, are you a fan of whiskey? If so, from whence does your preferred whiskey hail? I would say I'm more of a bourbon person, Kevin, to answer your question. But Pips K, say I am not altogether against the idea of Scotch whisky. I would say that my favourite Scotch whisky is Johnny Walker. So a bit boring of an answer. But my favourite bourbon is Knob Creek, because it has a hilarious name, and also because it is a genuinely fine whiskey from Kentucky, something I discovered last year. Not its origin, but the drink itself is something I discovered last year. And it's a very nice whiskey. It goes down your throat like a trail of horses riding off into the sunset with Indiana Jones, Henry, Marcus, and Sola on its back. Not all on the same horse. They each had a different horse. Elizabeth S. Is real absinthe available in the UK, or is it illegal like in the US? And have you ever tried it? So it's not illegal in the UK. I actually had my first ever shot of absinthe in the snow. I wasn't in the snow. I just walked through the snow to get to a pub in downtown Grimsby. And my friend Rob said, "This'll warm you up. Get one of these," and I did, and I was in a coma for 4 days. But as for the US ban, actually that ban was lifted about 11 years ago in 2007. So absinthe, in theory, is actually available to purchase, and in fact, I did purchase some absinthe a few years ago when my wife Tara and I were staying at the French Lick Hotel in southern Indiana, and it was marvelous. We had some of this absinthe, and we went down to dinner about half an hour later. And I don't know if you've ever stayed at French Lick Hotel, or anybody watching this has, but it's kind of like a hotel from the 1920s. You know, it saw its best days then, in a sense, and it's got the adjoining hotel with this grand ballroom. And so I was almost hallucinating having had this absinthe, and I thought I was in the hotel from The Shining, the Overlook Hotel. I genuinely thought I saw that old British guy, you know, the one who tells Jack Torrance to kill his kids. You know, he didn't say anything like that to me because I don't have any kids. You know, otherwise he would have been right on it. And but it was just this really weird and nice experience. And then I got punched in the face by a green frog. Woke up the next day in bed with Indiana Jones. Not with Indiana Jones, with the DVD, because I'd just been watching it. LA California Rocker Gal asks, what is your favourite alcohol in a cocktail? I'd have to say Jack Daniels. And Jamie asks, what are your favourite cocktails? I would have to say that prior to giving up pop /soda /fizzy drinks, it was a Jack and Coke. But I've since moved away from that because of the content. I don't know about now, but back in the day when I was at university, it was definitely Sex on the Beach. I'm still talking about cocktails here. And I've since learned that Sex on the Beach pairs really well with Knob Creek, so not always. Okay, Catherine Billiard, do you agree that beer should not be gassy and is best served at room temperature? And on a similar line, DJ K asks, if you like beer, do you prefer ice cold or room temperature? What way is it normally served in British pubs? Now, there seems to be a slight misconception that British beer is always warm and therefore horrible, but that was not always really my experience, I must say. My memory of having beers in pubs is that they were cold. Sometimes gassy, to answer Kath's question, but that wasn't altogether a bad thing, specifically the next day. It was for anybody that was sharing a room with me. But if they were a roommate, they probably partook themselves, and we probably each together marvelled in our own pungency the next day. As to whether I prefer cold or warm beer, I would say definitely cold. This one is straight out the fridge, and I'm drinking this cold, and it's beautiful. Come here. This is a private moment. Okay, let's finish with some embarrassing Lawrence drunk stories. This video, for one. Jean Thomas asks, have you ever gotten totally off your face on booze, and how long ago was it? Jamie asks, do you have an embarrassing drinking story that you can share, aside from the fact that I just try to make out with a beer can? I've definitely gotten off my face on booze too many times, although I haven't so much in recent years. As you get older, you start to realise that you can't do this anymore. You vomit out your internal organs so many times, and you're basically just a walking thread of skin, and bones. And so I would say I gave it up. One thing that springs to mind is my first day of university, right? I was absolutely portilloed, and I didn't know anybody. It was my first day, as I said, and I thought to win people over or make friends with people, the best thing I could do right now is climb that campus pub under the pretense that I am Spider-Man. And I did it. Well, I half did it. I fell halfway up. Ironically, I made more friends doing that because they all rushed to my aid. They forgot who I was the next day, which is a good thing. Another embarrassing episode is I once climbed up Corporation Bridge in Grimsby. My mother doesn't know any of this, by the way, and she's probably watching. I once tried to climb Corporation Bridge in Grimsby with a bit more success than I'd had climbing the pub. The police did arrive, but I got away in a shopping cart pushed by my friend Phil. So, good times. And finally, LA California Rocker Gal asks, what type of alcohol gave you the worst hangover? Hands down, it was vodka. Vodka straight is the worst for hangovers. It's also the worst just in general. When I was 18, I used to drink it quite often, because it went a long way. You get a cheap bottle of vodka and it would last a long time if you drank neat. But eventually I realized this is not working. I'm losing my liver, I'm losing my sanity. And so I gave it up, and as an experiment for 3 months solid, I just drank milk. Just went to the pubs and ordered a glass of milk, and they'd give it me, every time. That's it for this episode of AskABrit. Don't forget to join us for next week's episode when the topic will be the royal family. So get your questions coming in about the royals. They can be good or bad, the questions, not the royals. And of course, as ever, use the hashtag AskABrit. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can also go to my website, lostinthepond.com. And if you would like to support this channel monetarily or give me a drinking fund, then you can go to patreon.com/lostinthepond. Until next week, cheers, mate. Mate, that's mate in Yorkshire.